Hello, welcome to Lean Portfolio Management. My name is David Mantica. I'm the VP and General Manager of SoftEd US, and we are SoftEd here. We are going to talk about Lean Portfolio Management. This is a topic near and dear to my heart as it relates to things that I have done in my personal and professional career, really my professional career for quite some time. So let's jump into this Lean Portfolio Management. First off, if you have some time, it'd be great to go check out the IC Agile website and pull down the one resource, the white paper, or watch the video, because the resource here it's a very simple, easy to read resource. It gets into the foundational principles of Lean Portfolio Management. And it's a great first step for you to dig in and really learn about it. And a lot of what I'll be talking about ties into IC Agile's Lean Portfolio Management certification. There is a certification on this topic. Now you can go the SAFE route, and SAFE talks about portfolio management as well. So this is a non-framework specific way to run portfolios in a lean, agile manner. So you can see the track there. It ties into the finance track as well, because there is some financial stuff that we're going to talk about in the course of this session. Now, before I get started, I love feedback. I love comments. I show comments up on the screen as well. Aaron, hey, thanks for joining. We're going to be talking about 3 different pieces of Lean Portfolio Management. We'll start out by talking and putting it into context. Lean Portfolio Management in context. So let's take a look at this. What is it? It's adaptive and efficient, one. It's lean, so it talks about waste and energy control. And it's lean in the fact that it talks about customer centricity. So a way to run your overall portfolio of initiatives to ultimately maximize work effort around customer value in an adaptive way. So you're going to see the iterative mindset, the planning at the team level, the budgeting at a team level to maximize, and the word they use is slack. And I'm going to get into that in just a second, but to maximize slack. And remember, comments, questions, thoughts, please don't hesitate to share those in the chat. So really what we're looking at is we're looking at Lean Portfolio Management as part of business agility. And what we're saying is that the necessity, Lean Portfolio Management is needed. LPM is needed based on this VUCA world, this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And we'll start with that volatility side. Volatility requires slack. That means extra padding around what you're doing. To manage a lean portfolio properly, you can't maximize scheduled resources, especially over longer periods of time. You have to allow for slack, and slack allows you to be flexible and pivot and adjust so that you can make a quick turn around customer-centric value if you need to. The uncertainty aspect. Certainly, when you do LPM, you're looking at testing. That's kind of the fundamental aspect associated with agile way of working. You know, you want to be able to have in your portfolio a way to test. And then ambiguity, sorry about that. Ambiguity is really tied to learning. So Lean Portfolio Management wants to support a learning process as you continuously learn to figure out where you can reduce that waste. You can get into a flow of action activity associated with customer value. Now, my favorite element of this is complexity. An LPM requires a level of decentralized, autonomous activity, meaning independent entities empowered to make pivots and adjustments. and decisions that aren't specifically tied to one planning document, one structured budget, but are allowed to pivot and adjust to keep a customer-centric mindset, to be able to reduce waste and reduce efficiency. Just because I have a budget to run this set of products doesn't mean I should run these sets of products. It's the story of a friend of mine who was in the military flying into a base during Vietnam, and he seeing this big tire fire. And he comes and he says, "What's going on?" They're saying, "Well, we have to burn all these tires or we're going to lose our allotment for next year." Again, that mindset, look at the waste that was going on with regard to that type of mindset. So it fits into business agility, LPM. It's a tool to deal with VUCA across the enterprise. It's a tool to help deal with that complexity, ambiguity, volatility, and uncertainty across an enterprise. Now, some principles you want to look at with regard to lean portfolio management. Since it's lean, you have this idea of customer centricity. Really, really, really focusing in on being customer centric. Again, because it's lean, you want to optimize your value stream flow and reduce excessive work. And not a lot of the costs in our project-based environments these days has nothing to do with capital costs. It has to do with operational costs, the cost of people doing work. So knowledge workers can be extremely valuable, but they can also be extremely expensive. So you want to be able to optimize at that cost level. And then certainly you're going to see elements of value as a principle of lean portfolio management, because lean and value tie hand in hand. Basically, we're taking lean constructs to look at managing a portfolio at the top end, at the highest end of your overall decision making. And then finally ties into funding. So there is a thing called Agile for Finance. And I'll talk about a couple of funding elements tied into the lean portfolio management mindset. Again, if you have comments or questions or thoughts, don't hesitate to share them here with us. So comparing and contrasting here, you have traditional versus LPM. And the one I wanted to focus on is on that budgeting and funding side. You're funding the value streams. You're doing funding based on the activities in that value stream and what's producing outcomes. What's happening is you want to see the world of the yearly budget locked in dying. And you want to plan and have that plan to be able to fund and move money around where necessary to achieve the plan allocation of resources and funding to meet the needs of the organization. And I did this in a company that I ran, and I did my spending in 2-month increments. And I've reevaluated my plan and my spending every 2 months. Not to say that we didn't have an overall plan and a strategy. We had an overall understanding of where we wanted to be from a revenue and cost perspective. And we had the overall budget allocation. But how that budget was allocated was done through value stream management tied to initiatives and which initiatives were working and which initiatives were not working. And that leads to the fact of in lean portfolio management, you have to learn how to kill. You have to learn how to be smart about killing things as early in the process as possible, because killing saves money, killing saves resources, killing saves time, so that we can focus on other things that will produce value, or test to find other things that produce value. I was just talking about this with a team I coach and saying, all right, we tested this area in our portfolio. It's not working. We have to kill so we can move energy over to looking at other elements that we can stick into the value stream. So it's this, when you look at this, you're going to start seeing lots of elements of Agile. So it's moving that Agile mindset that agile way of working, iterative, continuous learning, self-organization, flow, value stream flow, but you're applying it to the portfolio level. And you're trying to take those mindsets and you're trying to apply those mindsets to the portfolio level as well. So when we look at the lean portfolio, LPM, and the agile triangle, you can see in that darker blue area things that we will have to shift. So with agile, it always starts out with a belief or mindset shift. And look at the left side, the value delivery team. I have a lot of debates as it relates to quality and delivery. I think that some of us are held back by the tyranny of quality. You want to deliver. From delivery, you want to adjust. If you try to deliver at the exact spec that you believe your customers want, you're going to have a significant amount of waste if you missed what it is that they wanted. So value delivery means putting things in people's hands that are usable, MVP. Then if usable, then adding the functionality, the features, and the quality to make it not just usable, but effective and efficient. So this idea of the tyranny of quality, from my perspective, as it relates to me, especially outwardly focused projects and products, can be the kiss of death, because you waste so much time trying to make something, what you really believe it should be, when you should be testing other items within your portfolio against the marketplace. And so value is now not, and if you look at the triangle, it's not just value in a way of saying what's valuable. It's really looking at customer and user feedback, true value based on the people that you are supporting. And then this last one, governance. Governance ties to financial decision-making, tied back to strategy and outcomes, trying to move that financial responsibility more to the team and action, less to financial command and control. Because in financial command and control, it's really hard for them to see at the ground level what is really going on. And that's extremely important in portfolio management. Like especially LPM, I want to make sure my finance team understands, one, I have a strategy. Two, I'm driving my portfolio management around that strategy. And we'll get into adaptive strategy here in a bit. And I want to show them I have the financial stewardship to make quick decisions. Yeah, we stopped doing that because of this. We stopped doing this because of this. We pulled in and spent more money here because of this. That's a hard one for companies. Part of LPM that's really the most difficult is making that pivot over to more and more governance at the team and the value stream level of that management of that team, and less into just a structured financial control organization. So you have to have a strategy in lean portfolio management, but the strategy's got to be adaptive. Remember, I talked about the thing called slack. Your strategy should allow for slack so that you have time to be able to answer these questions throughout the initiatives that you're working on. What I like to say about adaptive strategy is it protects you from the status quo. Everything you have in your portfolio needs to be managed. Everything you have in your portfolio has a life cycle, and that life cycle also comes with disruptions. So we want to initiate and utilize this mapping, to be able to test and look at each element in our portfolio to make sure that we don't get sucked into the status quo as a protection device. Oh, it's fine. Everything's working okay. We want to be able to look at what are we trying to win here? What are we trying to aspire at that customer level? Where will you ultimately be able to do the work? What area? Maybe the geography is going to change. How will you win? What's the value that you're going to deliver and the competitive advantage you're going to be delivering? And we're going to show these 3 circles here in a little bit. And then ultimately, does what we do to service the things we have, where are the changes that need to be done there? And this is important because technical debt can become a very big challenge for organizations from an agile perspective. But in lean portfolio management, you want to make sure that your systems are keeping up with what you're trying to deliver from customer centricity perspective. And with the cloud enablement capabilities that are available to us, there is a lot more that can happen at that level than could happen before. Another element associated with adaptive strategy is you have to look at the fact that your market is constantly changing, evolving, adjusting. So this goes back to VUCA. How often do you have to look at this as you're tying back to where your portfolio is going? You know, if you do a quick pest analysis right now, economics is still all about inflation. So the extra cost of things going into the future, and the extra cost and the reduction of value in what you have now and what it can pay for in the future. So what does that mean? How do you handle that? The cost of borrowing, the cost, and what's that impact? The technology side, generative AI. What are you going to do about that? How does it fit your business? Our social cultural situation's a mess. You know, you got on the retailer side, you got people protesting on both sides of the political spectrum, whether you're going to buy from that company or not buy from that company. How are you going to address those things as it relates to where you go in the marketplace? And then finally, as it relates to political, you know, we're looking at campaign season right now. What does that mean? How does that stymie growth, stymie, activity, reduce confidence? So internally, you have to be looking at these things. Internally, economics first perspective. Maybe it's not the right time for capital expenditure. Maybe we want to get more out of the team we have, and maybe we want to build more internally than go externally because of the cost of acquisition and the cost to actually get that capital, aka the interest rate that you have to pay on it. So it's one aspect that you internally you're going to be looking at. Social culturally, how are you going to service? How are you going to train as it relates to the systems that you're building to meet social and cultural situations as they are at this point in time? So as part of your adaptive approach, though, you should have a basis. So this is a great quick snapshot analysis of looking at where do you want to play. Do you want a broad market? So you want to go across the US? Do you want to go across North America? Do you want to go across the world? Where do you want to be as it relates to your broad market? Then, do you want to be special, unique, or do you want to be everything for everyone? So when I owned a company called ASPE, I had a portfolio strategy. And my portfolio strategy was to have a broad market because of my marketing capabilities, with my feasibility and my organization. But I also wanted to have a level of differentiation. So I wanted to have something that was special in a specific area. We were really good at X, but we were really good at it across a wide, broader market. And you can see the tie into some of these products and ultimately where they fit. But what about your are you a smaller business in a niche, and you need to make your strategy on your systems and your tools tied to that niche based on the persona of the people that you're going to be working with, as well as then of course your customer situation. Local government, basically you have to have low cost in a narrow niche, And you have to figure out how to provide that service in a way that is going to be appealing to the masses. If you look at it just from the market perspective. What happens a lot in this area from a poor strategy perspective is mixed messages. You're in one area and you're trying to be in another area. You're trying to do too much. You're in a narrow niche market, but you're trying to bring in tool sets that are broad-based tool sets just because you hear that other big companies are using those tool sets. That's from an internal perspective. And this happens quite a bit. What you could use when you're when you're supporting a broad market company internally versus what you're doing when you're trying to support a narrow. The same token is if you're trying to support a narrow differentiated, the fidelity of the services that you have to provide have to be tight, and you can spend more to provide those tight hands-on customer service or hands-on customer care or very quick responses as it relates to what you're doing internally with your overall internal value stream and strategy for the products that you have and want. Again, feedback or comments, please don't hesitate to pop those in there. Love to hear from you. And then as part of strategy, you want to look at your 3 elements. And I think when you get into this, the core thinking with these elements are that you have to look at it as your portfolio. Each piece of the portfolio, how do they fit here? But you also want to connect internally that portfolio to your feasibility, what you can actually do. Because if you could do things in what you actually do, you can control your costs around OPEX, operational expenses. If you have to build and add, then you have to bring that CapEx in, which increases the amount of risk involved in a venture that you're doing. For instance, for a training company like me, if we wanted to go to on-demand e-learning, we would have to make an investment in an LMS system and content developers and content management to do that appropriately. So we don't have that feasibility currently. So when you look at your portfolio approach, you want to tie back to feasibility, but understand some elements of the portfolio might have to build a different feasibility, which means then you have to plan for that CapEx. So some of these anti-patterns are really good. And what I want to think about here for just a second is think about your home as a business. And your home has an overall portfolio. You have costs, you have internal systems, you have revenue coming in. And I think what you really want to look at here is what are some of the bad decisions, these anti-patterns you can make when you're thinking about your business. I mean, your home as a portfolio. Fluff, do you really need that? And I'm sure there's a lot of debates in the home portfolio about that. Nice to have versus need to have. The challenges, you got 3 kids, and you want to put them in school and you want to put them through private school. What are the challenges associated with that? What's the planning that has to occur? You must face those challenges in your strategic planning. It's not just about getting things done and checking boxes. Goals are not strategy. You have to know those differences. You have to ultimately have a financial strategy to meet specific goals. Are you going to have a conservative financial strategy so your goals are going to be tempered? Are you going to have an aggressive financial strategy and ultimately you've got goals that are going to be more, you're willing to take some risks? And then ultimately having bad objectives, doing things against a budget in your portfolio doesn't make sense. Andrew talks about this in the growth mindset. There are certainly connectors with the growth mindset and lean portfolio management. And that ties back to the learning you do and utilizing tools like design thinking and lean startup to effectively test and try and learn on different elements of the new pieces to your portfolio. And certainly a decentralized autonomous agents working to manage and support the portfolio should have that growth mindset as well. And ultimately, any area that requires learning And in VUCA, in volatility, uncertainty, and complexity, learning is critical. Then you need that growth mindset. Great question, Aaron. Thanks for sharing it. So now we get into the value streams. So value streams, what, why, and what? Basically, it's the soup to nut, the beginning and the end of delivering something. The beginning and the end of delivering something. And that means the delivery to the end customer. And what are the elements that are involved in that delivery? Should they be involved? Should they not be involved? Are they doing less, too much? Are they doing too little? And then you can see how you can tighten that stream. And in the course of a company, there's going to be lots of different value streams. But those value streams should ultimately be connected to the output that an internal or external customer is going to get. So those activities at the beginning to the end. And the magic, and this is where, lean comes to play in value streams, is that process. I have things. I need Slack, so I have extra customer requests. Or we're just running the business and we want to consistently be more and more efficient. Or we have changes and adjustments to the market process. Each value stream set up appropriately can adjust and pivot to those inputs necessary to provide the internal or external services you want. And certain value streams might not be impacted by certain inputs. So you want to be able to have that flexibility in your value stream management. So it's not an all or nothing. It's being smart about where you're investing and where you're adjusting based on what is happening in the inputs and the system, in that stream that gets you to that output. Less involvement. Not everybody has to be impacted. And value streams show you what needs to be impacted based on what the input is. And looking at some of these good practices, I like the idea of the whole stream. Ultimately, what is the stream necessary in your home business, to deliver a potentially positive college experience, or to deliver, health and wellness to your children? What's the value stream associated with that? What's the value stream associated with maintaining your house externally and internally, beginning and end? And even that gets to some emotional support elements as well. And value streams have that piece of it. There needs to be some emotional support elements as well. And so some of your segments or design patterns, you can see things that adjust and change based on where you're trying to go. How your customer's overall journey to access what you're building might change. You might have different capabilities. You might have technology challenges that will change those capabilities. And this is some of the things that you have to adjust to in your portfolio to change and effectively make more positive your value streams. Finally, funding, and we'll end with these slides. So there's always waste. And the thing that you want to become very good at in portfolio managing is smelling at that waste. I know my household business, and I know my household business waste is an inventory, especially as it relates to food, cleaning supplies, items. We have an inventory problem. We have a lot of cash tied up in inventory that may get wasted. And I know that. And so you can know and see and feel what is going on. Defects provide waste, especially defects late in the process. Too much production, too much inventory, huge waste. That's money that's sitting there that didn't necessarily need to be spent. Our team's waiting, and there's always a wait period, but they have nothing, they're idle. Look at that unused talent. I talk about that unused talent a lot, especially with knowledge workers. Are you tapping into all the capability that the knowledge workers have? So this is really great from a standpoint of lean portfolio, is to be looking at your value streams and seeing where some of these waste elements are. So we have a question here: how does LPM and startup organizations design helps, especially funding through pitches with VC and angel investors on project milestone deliveries? Lean portfolio management is a very powerful tool for startups that should be used for startups, especially around the idea of lean startup tied to it. Because what this gives you is you talk through the fact that you have funding, and then you want to be able to show the angels where you want your tranches of funding. I would much better as a startup begin asking for cash at certain periods and not just getting the cash all up front. And that effectively helps the VC because they can keep their money in play as you start to bring in tranches of money based on where you're at in the management of your portfolio. This also gives you slack so that you can pivot more easily, and show a new plan. And based on that, showing new tranche of money that is needed. Too often on the VC and funding side, basically someone just throws the cash at you. Here's $500,000, now go run. And the excitement and euphoria of that money gets lost. I mean, gets forces you to do things that you shouldn't be doing early stages. So lean portfolio management is trying to help you determine what you should be doing first and how you should manage that accordingly. So yes, it's very good, very powerful tool for showing how you're going to manage the funding, what you're going to build in your portfolio, and then the stages of funding you'll be needing based on funding at that portfolio level. So Gary says, the tyranny of quality. We've had many IT projects fail because the project delivered junk that customers could not or refused to use because of poor quality. Without usage, we get no business value. Suggestion: deliver the level of quality required to get the expected business value, but no more. Yes, until you can see if people continue to use it, then you can build in more and more quality. Absolutely, Gary. So I'm not saying that you can't build something that's not functional. You want to build it such that people can see it, test it, and feel it. Great share. Thank you, Gary, for doing that. Appreciate it. So we talked about this a bit in part of understanding how to manage your portfolio. You have to know what your CapEx are, and you have to know what your operational costs are. In a household, your operational costs are going to be your food, your electricity, your heating bill, the gas for your cars. Your capital expenditure is going to be furniture buys, car purchases. It's going to be educational purchases or capital expenditures. And remember, capital expenditures can be depreciated and amortized as well, but ultimately a lot of times capital expenditures have to be paid for with credit, not with cash. And that means there are the costs and risks associated with that credit, especially when credit is tight. And that's why interest rates is a tool in the economy to reduce economic growth, because it makes people reconsider capital expenditures. And then what a portfolio manager is going to do, just like as it relates to agile team, is you're going to get into a mindset of story point estimating, but you're doing it at the team level. So here is the team level. Each team has a certain amount of function and capability. And I'm going to say team A has this amount of function and capability, so I could do it in hours. You got team B, you got team C. So as I'm looking at utilizing those teams and putting those teams into a plan, I'm not looking at the individuals in the team. I'm looking at that overall team capability. So I can assume I have a team. This team could do $500,000 worth of work. They cost $500,000. So I can plan, if I'm going to use that team in a project, that's what their cost is going to be. And then you can see how that grows up, so you can ultimately define it across multiple teams. You can use story points as well. So each team has a certain amount of story points they could do in a given week, and then you can add those up to a year standpoint. But ultimately you're going to have to convert that to dollars from a budgeting standpoint. So what this is saying is that, and you can adjust that either most likely in the amount of money per person. A higher performing team is going to cost you more because most likely it has elements in it that are more expensive. A less performing team is going to cost you less, so they are less productive, so they're less, so that they might ultimately be a little less costly. At the same time, you can look at that team could be less efficient, so it could be more costly. So you have to kind of look through and think through the pros and cons of how you're evaluating each team. But ultimately, you have to put a number around that team, so then you can put those teams together and say, if I have this amount of money, this is how many teams I need, and these are the teams I need working on those projects. And then you get into adaptive budgeting. Michael, you had something to say here regarding planning fallacy. Often developers are pushed to give a date or a three-point count. I heard a developer push back to the business side, asking them if they can provide an equally accurate return and time for that return. It was a snarky comment at the time, but if you can have a civilized discussion, it feels like a good, lean way to balance. Yes, absolutely. It's all about time and return. All right, why do I need it by this time? What's the return? Ultimately, okay, what caused this to happen? Why is there so many rushes? How can we fix it so we're not rushing that way going forward? It has to be an even exchange. One side of that one piece of the value stream is not more important than the other piece. And yes, that's part of the symbiotic relationship between both sides. Without that balance, you have problems, which is then the developer side feels less than autonomous. They're going to do just what they're told, and they're not going to bring extra value back in the overall delivery of the work they're trying to do. And then you got some differences here associated with traditional budgeting. It really revolves around this idea of being responsive to change. In my 2-month budgeting cycles, I could very quickly kill something or stop something, or I could very quickly scale something up. And as I'm scaling something up, I could then turn on hiring, turn on training, and add different pieces of technology to the process based on where I'm seeing that scaling occur. And I'm not just stuck in a box. So I can't do that. I got to go back and ask for money because it's not in the budget. And that's a worst case scenario. So I want to thank you all. I hope you continue with your learning journey. You have the Lean Portfolio Management certification you can take a look at. Is there any other comment, thoughts, ideas before I sign off? I want to thank you all for your participation and your questions as well. All right. If there's any additional comments, just I'll check them out after the session. Thank you all.